In the idyllic town of Brookfield, where life seems perfect and every family appears happy, a gripping tale of love, betrayal, and redemption unfolds. Join us as we delve into the lives of the Roberts family, a seemingly perfect couple whose world is turned upside down by secrets and lies. Betrayal in Brookfield, the unraveling of a perfect life with a cheating wife, explores the delicate balance between trust and deception, and the profound impact of one woman's choices. Stay tuned as we reveal how this picturesque life crumbles and what it takes to pick up the pieces. In the heart of Brookfield, a picturesque suburban town adorned with tree-lined streets and cozy coffee shops, the Roberts family stood as a beacon of happiness and success. Brookfield was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and neighbors often exchanged pleasantries over white picket fences. It was a town where life moved at a leisurely pace, allowing its residents to bask in the simple pleasures of small-town living. Michael Roberts was a figure of respect in the community, not just for his role as a top-notch lawyer but for his unwavering integrity and dedication. At 45, he had worked his way up to become a senior partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. His tall, athletic build and sharp, thoughtful eyes gave him an air of quiet authority. Colleagues at the firm often looked up to him as a mentor, admiring his ability to balance a demanding career with his personal life. Clients trusted him implicitly, knowing their cases were in the most capable hands. Michael's wife, Laura, complemented him perfectly. With her radiant smile and effortless grace, Laura was the epitome of charm and elegance. At 42, she managed to juggle her roles as a mother and a local socialite with what seemed like ease. Her days were filled with volunteer work at the community center, organizing charity events, and playing an active part in the school PTA. To the outside observer, Laura was not only fulfilling her familial duties but thriving in them. Their home was a beautiful, sprawling estate at the edge of town, with a well-manicured lawn and a backyard perfect for their two children, James and Sophia, to play in. The house, a two-story colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch, was the envy of many in Brookfield. It was in this idyllic setting that the Roberts hosted their famous weekend barbecues, attended by a close-knit circle of friends and family, often extending into warm, laughter-filled evenings. On a bright Saturday morning in early spring, the Roberts household was buzzing with activity. Laura stood in the kitchen, her favorite place in the house, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The kitchen was a blend of modern appliances and rustic charm, with white cabinetry, marble countertops, and a large island where the family often gathered. "Mom, can I help with the pancakes?" Sophia's voice piped up from behind her. Laura turned to see her 10-year-old daughter, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking up at her with eager eyes. "Of course, sweetie," she replied, handing Sophia a whisk. "Why don't you mix the batter for me?" Sophia climbed onto a stool and began to stir the mixture with concentration, her small hands gripping the whisk tightly. Laura watched her daughter with a smile, feeling a rush of affection. Moments like these made the busy days worthwhile. Just then, James, their 12-year-old son, bounded into the kitchen. "Dad and I are going to the park to practice baseball after breakfast," he announced, a baseball glove already clutched in his hand. "That sounds great, James," Laura said, her smile widening. "Just make sure you wear a jacket. It's still a bit chilly outside." As if on cue, Michael entered the kitchen, dressed casually in jeans and a navy blue sweater. He walked over to Laura and planted a kiss on her cheek. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "Good morning," Laura replied, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. Michael turned to his children, a proud smile on his face. "Ready to hit some home runs, champ?" he asked James. "Definitely," James replied, his eyes shining with excitement. Breakfast was a lively affair, filled with laughter and the clatter of dishes. The family sat around the large oak table in the dining room, a sunlit space adorned with family photos and Laura's favorite floral arrangements. As they ate, they chatted about their plans for the day. "I'm meeting with the PTA in the afternoon to finalize the details for the spring fundraiser," Laura mentioned, pouring syrup over her pancakes. "And I'm heading to the office for a few hours to wrap up some work on the Thompson case," Michael added, taking a sip of his coffee. James and Sophia exchanged a glance, their excitement for the day's activities evident. "Can we go to the ice cream parlor after practice?" Sophia asked, her eyes wide with hope. Michael chuckled. "We'll see, sweetheart. Maybe if your brother hits a few home runs." After breakfast, the family dispersed to their various activities. Laura cleaned up the kitchen, her thoughts already drifting to the afternoon's PTA meeting. She loved being involved in the community and took pride in organizing events that brought people together. As she wiped down the countertops, she mentally reviewed the checklist for the fundraiser, ensuring everything was in order. Meanwhile, Michael and James headed to the local park, a sprawling green space with baseball fields, playgrounds, and walking trails. The park was a favorite spot for the Roberts family, offering a peaceful retreat from the hustle and bustle of daily life. "All right, let's see that swing, James," Michael said, tossing a baseball to his son. James grinned and took his stance, his eyes focused on the ball. With a practiced motion, he swung the bat, connecting with a satisfying crack. The ball soared through the air, and Michael's heart swelled with pride. "Great job, buddy," he called out, clapping his hands. As they continued their practice, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. Despite the demands of his career, these moments with his family made everything worthwhile. He cherished the time spent with his children, watching them grow and develop their interests. Back at the house, Laura finished tidying up and moved on to her next task. She had a stack of papers to review for the fundraiser and needed to finalize the guest list. Sitting down at the dining table, she spread out the documents and began to work, her mind focused and organized. The hours passed quickly, and before she knew it, it was time to head to the PTA meeting. Laura grabbed her bag and keys, taking a moment to glance at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her blue eyes, framed by dark lashes, held a determined glint. She was ready to tackle the day's challenges. Arriving at the community center, Laura was greeted by the familiar faces of her fellow PTA members. They gathered around a large table in the meeting room, their discussions animated and filled with enthusiasm. "Good afternoon, everyone," Laura began, her voice confident. "Let's get started. We have a lot to cover today." As the meeting progressed, Laura's leadership skills shone through. She deftly navigated through the agenda, addressing concerns and delegating tasks. Her ability to bring people together and inspire them was one of the reasons she was so well respected in Brookfield. Meanwhile, Michael returned home with James, both of them energized from their time at the park. They found Sophia in the living room, engrossed in a book, and Michael couldn't help but smile at the sight. He admired his children's passion for learning and sports, seeing a reflection of himself and Laura in them. The day continued in a whirlwind of activities, each family member immersed in their own pursuits. But despite their busy schedules, the Roberts family always made time for each other. They gathered again in the evening for dinner, sharing stories and laughter around the table. As night fell and the children were tucked into bed, Michael and Laura found a moment of quiet together in the living room. The soft glow of the fireplace cast a warm light over the room, creating a cozy ambiance. "Today was a good day," Michael said, his arm draped around Laura's shoulders. "It was," Laura agreed, resting her head against him. "I'm so proud of James and Sophia. They're growing up so fast." Michael nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "We have a wonderful life, Laura. I'm grateful for every moment." Laura smiled, feeling a deep sense of love and contentment. "So am I, Michael. So am I." As they sat together, enjoying the peacefulness of the evening, the Roberts family embodied the essence of happiness and success. Their life in Brookfield was a testament to the power of love, dedication, and the simple joys of family. But beneath this perfect exterior, subtle cracks were beginning to form, hinting at challenges that would soon test the strength of their bonds. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Roberts dining room, casting delicate patterns of light and shadow on the polished wooden table. Laura Roberts sat with a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, staring out the window at the well-manicured lawn that stretched out before her. The birds were chirping, and the flowers in the garden were beginning to bloom, but Laura's mind was elsewhere. "Mom, can you sign this permission slip?" James's voice broke through her reverie. She turned to see her 12-year-old son holding out a crumpled piece of paper, his eyes expectant. Of course, sweetheart, Laura replied, mustering a smile as she took the paper and pen from him. She glanced over the details, a field trip to the Science Museum, before signing her name at the bottom. Thanks, Mom, James said, flashing her a grin before dashing off to join his sister Sophia, who was already seated at the table, her nose buried in a book. Laura watched her children for a moment, her heart swelling with love and pride. They were good kids, smart, kind, and full of life. She wanted nothing more than to be the perfect mother they deserved. Yet, lately, she felt a growing sense of unease, as if something was missing from her otherwise picture-perfect life. The door to the kitchen swung open, and Michael entered, dressed in a crisp suit, ready for another demanding day at the law firm. Morning, everyone, he greeted, his voice warm and steady. Good morning, Michael, Laura replied, standing up to give him a quick kiss on the cheek. Coffee's ready. You're a lifesaver, Michael said with a smile, taking the mug she offered. He took a sip and sighed contentedly. What's on your agenda today? I have a few errands to run, and then I'm meeting with the PTA this afternoon, Laura replied, trying to keep her tone light and cheerful. Michael nodded, glancing at his watch. I should be home by 7, but don't wait up for me. I might have to stay late to work on the Thompson case. Laura felt a pang of disappointment but quickly pushed it aside. Of course. Just don't work too hard, she said, her smile a little forced. I'll try, Michael promised, ruffling James's hair as he passed by. You two behave for your mother, okay? Yes, Dad, James and Sophia chorused, their voices filled with affection. As Michael headed out the door, Laura felt a familiar ache in her chest. She loved her husband deeply, but his demanding career often left her feeling lonely and isolated. She had tried to fill the void with volunteer work and social engagements, but lately, even those activities seemed to lack the spark they once had. After dropping the kids off at school, Laura ran her errands mechanically, her mind drifting back to the conversation she had had with her friend, Lisa, just the day before. You seem distracted, Laura. Is everything okay? Lisa had asked, her eyes filled with concern. I'm fine, Laura had replied, forcing a smile. Just busy, you know how it is. But Lisa hadn't been convinced. If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you, she had said gently. Now, as Laura parked her car in front of the quaint cafe where she was supposed to meet Brian Carter, Michael's business partner, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of a precipice. She had agreed to meet Brian to discuss the upcoming charity event, but there was an unspoken tension between them that had been growing ever since that fateful weekend. Laura, Brian greeted her with a charming smile as she entered the cafe. It's good to see you. Good to see you too, Brian, Laura replied, taking a seat opposite him. The cafe was dimly lit and nearly empty, providing a perfect setting for their clandestine meeting. They ordered coffee and exchanged pleasantries, but Laura could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Brian leaned in, his voice low and earnest. I can't stop thinking about last weekend. Laura's heart raced as she looked into his eyes, filled with a mix of excitement and guilt. Brian, we shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know, Brian replied, reaching across the table to take her hand. But I can't help how I feel. Can you? Laura shook her head, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. No, I can't. They sat in silence for a moment, their hands intertwined, the enormity of their situation pressing down on them. Laura knew that she was playing with fire, but the thrill of their secret meetings was a welcome escape from the monotony of her everyday life. As they parted ways, Laura felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She loved Michael and her children, but she couldn't deny the growing connection she felt with Brian. It was a dangerous game she was playing, and she knew that eventually, something would have to give. Over the next few weeks, Laura's behavior began to change subtly. She became more withdrawn, her smiles more forced, and her laughter a tad too delayed. Michael, deeply engrossed in his demanding career, failed to notice these minute changes. His hours were long, often leaving home before dawn and returning well after sunset. He believed in hard work and was consumed by the high-profile Thompson case that demanded much of his attention. Trusting Laura to manage their home and children, he remained oblivious to the shifting currents under the tranquil surface of their domestic life. One evening, as Michael was working late at the office, Laura received another text from Brian. "Can't wait to see you again," it read, making her heart skip a beat. She quickly typed a response before erasing the messages, a routine that had become all too familiar. The thrill of their secret meetings had started as a thrilling escape from her routine life but had evolved into a consuming affair that she could neither end nor fully embrace. Laura would often meet Brian at a quaint cafe hidden away in a less frequented part of town. The cafe, with its dim lighting and secluded booths, provided the perfect cover for their clandestine encounters. As they sat across from each other, their conversations would meander from fervent declarations of affection to whispered plans about their next meeting. Each goodbye was a promise of another hello, further entangling Laura in a web of deceit. At home, Laura's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Her once meticulous planning and cheerful involvement in family activities gave way to forgetfulness and a lack of engagement. She began to miss school events and mixed up dates for Michael's office functions, which she had always attended without fail. "Mom, you forgot to pack my lunch again," James complained one morning, his tone tinged with frustration. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," Laura said, flustered as she quickly put together a sandwich. "I've just been so busy lately." "It's okay, Mom," Sophia chimed in, trying to diffuse the tension. "We know you have a lot on your plate." Laura smiled gratefully at her daughter, but inside, she felt a pang of guilt. She knew she was letting her family down, but she couldn't seem to find a way out of the mess she had created. Michael, preoccupied with his career, initially attributed Laura's change in demeanor to stress or perhaps a passing phase. However, as her absences became more frequent and her excuses more flimsy, a seed of doubt planted itself in his mind. He noticed how Laura's phone seemed to be a constant presence in her hand, and how she would quickly turn off the screen if he walked into the room. "Everything okay, Laura?" Michael asked one evening as they sat together in the living room, the television playing in the background. "Yes, why do you ask?" Laura replied, her voice a little too bright. "You've just seemed a bit distant lately," Michael said, his eyes searching her face for answers. "I'm fine, really," Laura insisted, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." Michael nodded, but the doubt lingered. He loved Laura deeply, and the thought of something being wrong between them filled him with a sense of dread. As the days went by, Laura's internal struggle intensified. She loved her family, and the thought of hurting Michael and the children was unbearable. Yet, her feelings for Brian had grown deeper than she had ever anticipated. She found herself caught between her duties as a wife and mother and her desires as an individual, a conflict that left her feeling isolated and tormented. The affair continued, each secret meeting leaving Laura more conflicted than the last. She started to concoct more elaborate lies to cover her tracks, lies that wove a complex tapestry of deception. Her heart raced every time Michael asked about her day or inquired about her sudden plans. The fear of being discovered loomed large, casting a shadow over her every moment. As Michael's suspicions grew, so did the distance between him and Laura. The home that once echoed with laughter and conversation now bore a silence that was punctuated only by the routine exchanges of day-to-day life. The bond they had built over years seemed to be fraying at the edges, threatened by the secret Laura was keeping just out of sight. In the quiet of a restless night, as Laura lay awake next to Michael, the reality of her situation pressed down upon her. She knew that something would have to give, the truth would come out, one way or another. The thought terrified her, but she also felt a desperate longing for relief from the burden of her duplicity. The stage was set for a confrontation that could unravel everything they had built. The tension that had been building in the Roberts household reached a tipping point on a brisk spring evening. Michael had been increasingly consumed by his suspicions, leading him to return home earlier than usual, propelled by a need to find answers. His heart pounded with a mixture of dread and urgency as he turned his key in the lock, his mind braced for any number of possibilities. Inside, the house was unusually quiet. The children were at a sleepover, and Laura had mentioned she would be home late from another fundraising event. As Michael walked through the dimly lit hallway, his ears picked up faint sounds that seemed out of place. Following the noise, he approached the living room, where the muffled sounds became clearer. There, through the slightly ajar door, he saw them, Laura and Brian, lost in an embrace that shattered any remnants of doubt in Michael's mind. They were too engrossed in each other to notice his presence. Michael's world, as he knew it, crumbled in that instant. His initial shock gave way to a surge of anger as he pushed the door open fully, confronting the scene before him. Brookfield was known for its charming downtown area, a place where the streets were lined with small shops and cafes that exuded an old-world charm. Among these establishments was the Whispering Willow, a quaint cafe hidden away in a less frequented part of town. With its dim lighting, secluded booths, and the soft hum of jazz playing in the background, it was the perfect spot for those seeking privacy. It was here that Laura often met Brian, away from the prying eyes of the world. Laura parked her car a few blocks away, as she always did, to avoid any chance of being recognized. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing a stray lock of hair, and took a deep breath. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and guilt as she walked toward the cafe, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. "Laura, over here," Brian called out softly as she entered, waving her over to a booth in the back. He was already seated, a cup of coffee in front of him. "Hi, Brian," Laura replied, her voice low as she slid into the booth opposite him. The familiar rush of emotions washed over her as their eyes met. "You look beautiful," Brian said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," Laura admitted, her fingers intertwining with his. "It's been too long." Their conversations at the cafe were a blend of fervent declarations of affection and whispered plans for their next meeting. Each moment together was stolen from the fabric of their ordinary lives, woven into a tapestry of secrecy and desire. "What did you tell Michael?" Brian asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching. "That I had a meeting with the PTA," Laura replied, a hint of guilt coloring her words. "He's been so busy with work, he barely notices when I'm gone." Brian squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll be careful. We have to be." Laura nodded, but the weight of their deception pressed heavily on her. She loved her family, and the thought of hurting Michael and the children was unbearable. Yet, her feelings for Brian had grown deeper than she had ever anticipated. She was caught in a web of her own making, unable to see a way out. As they talked, Laura's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and quickly turned the screen down when she saw it was from Michael. Her heart skipped a beat. "I should go soon," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "Michael's expecting me back." Brian's expression softened with understanding. "I know. Just a little longer, please." They lingered for a few more minutes, savoring the fleeting time together. When they finally parted, Laura felt a familiar mix of longing and remorse. As she drove home, her thoughts were a jumble of conflicting emotions. She loved Michael, but the excitement and connection she felt with Brian were undeniable. Back at the Roberts home, the strain was beginning to show. Laura's once meticulous planning and cheerful involvement in family activities had given way to forgetfulness and a lack of engagement. She began to miss school events and mixed up dates for Michael's office functions, which she had always attended without fail. One evening, as Laura was preparing dinner, Michael walked into the kitchen, a stack of papers in his hand. "Laura, did you forget about the firm's charity gala next week?" he asked, his tone more puzzled than accusatory. Laura looked up, her brow furrowing. "The gala? No, of course not. It's on the 10th, right?" Michael sighed, placing the papers on the counter. "No, it's on the 7th. I reminded you last week." Laura's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I must have written it down wrong." "It's all right," Michael said, but there was a note of concern in his voice. "Are you sure everything's okay?" "I'm fine, just a little overwhelmed with all the PTA stuff," Laura replied, forcing a smile. "I'll make sure to update the calendar." Michael nodded, but the seed of doubt that had been planted in his mind continued to grow. He loved Laura deeply, and the thought of something being wrong between them filled him with a sense of dread. He decided to let it go for now, but the nagging worry remained. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Laura stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She knew she was letting her family down, but she couldn't seem to find a way out of the mess she had created. She loved Michael and the children, but her feelings for Brian had become an overwhelming presence in her life. "Michael," she said softly, turning to face him. "Do you think we're drifting apart?" Michael looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. "Why do you say that?" "I don't know," Laura replied, her voice trembling. "It just feels like we're not as close as we used to be." Michael reached out, taking her hand in his. "I've been really busy with work lately, and I know it's taken a toll. But I love you, Laura. We'll get through this." Laura nodded, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "I love you too, Michael. I want us to be okay." "We will be," Michael said, his voice firm. "We just need to make more time for each other." Laura clung to his words, hoping they were true. But deep down, she knew that the path she was on was leading them further and further apart. As the weeks went by, Laura's internal struggle intensified. The affair continued, each secret meeting leaving her more conflicted than the last. She started to concoct more elaborate lies to cover her tracks, lies that wove a complex tapestry of deception. Her heart raced every time Michael asked about her day or inquired about her sudden plans. The fear of being discovered loomed large, casting a shadow over her every moment. One afternoon, Laura met Lisa for coffee at a different cafe, one that was a regular spot for their friendly chats. Lisa had been her confidante for years, and Laura valued her advice and support. "You've been so distant lately," Lisa said, her brow furrowing with concern. "Is everything okay?" Laura hesitated, stirring her coffee absently. "I'm just dealing with a lot right now. Michael's so busy with work, and I'm trying to keep up with everything at home." Lisa reached out, placing a hand on Laura's arm. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "I know," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just complicated." Lisa studied her friend's face, sensing there was more beneath the surface. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you." "Thank you, Lisa," Laura replied, offering a small smile. "I really appreciate it." As they continued their conversation, Laura felt a pang of guilt for not being able to confide in her friend completely. The weight of her secret was becoming almost unbearable, but she couldn't bring herself to share it with anyone. That evening, as Laura prepared dinner, Michael walked into the kitchen, his expression serious. "Laura, we need to talk." Laura's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "I found your phone the other day," Michael said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of tension. "There were a lot of deleted messages. Is there something you're not telling me?" Laura felt a surge of panic, but she tried to keep her composure. "Michael, I've just been stressed. Sometimes I delete messages to clear my mind." Michael studied her face, his eyes searching for the truth. "Laura, I love you. If there's something wrong, we can work through it together. But I need you to be honest with me." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she looked at her husband, the man she had shared so much with. "Michael, I'm sorry. I've been feeling so overwhelmed lately. I didn't mean to worry you." Michael pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "We'll get through this, Laura. I promise." As Laura clung to him, she felt a mix of relief and guilt. She knew she was walking a dangerous path, and the lies were becoming harder to maintain. But she couldn't bring herself to end things with Brian, even though she knew it was tearing her apart. The strain between Laura and Michael continued to grow, despite their efforts to bridge the gap. At home, the once harmonious environment was now charged with tension. Laura's mind was constantly divided, torn between her love for her family and her feelings for Brian. One day, as Laura was leaving the house to meet Brian, Michael called out to her. "Laura, wait." She turned, her heart racing. "Yes?" Michael walked up to her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a trip, just the two of us. Get away from everything and spend some time together." Laura felt a pang of guilt, knowing that a trip would make it even harder to maintain her secret. "That sounds wonderful, Michael. But I have so much going on right now." Michael's eyes softened, I know. But we need this, Laura. Our marriage needs this. Laura nodded, forcing a smile. You're right. Let's do it. As she drove to meet Brian, Laura's mind was in turmoil. She knew that she couldn't keep up the facade much longer. The truth was bound to come out, and she dreaded the day it would. When she arrived at the cafe, Brian was already there, waiting for her. He stood up as she approached, concern etched on his face. Laura, what's wrong? Laura sat down, her hands trembling. Michael wants to take a trip together. Just the two of us. Brian's expression darkened. What are you going to do? I don't know, Laura replied, tears welling up in her eyes. I feel like everything is falling apart. Brian reached out, taking her hands in his. We'll figure this out, Laura. I promise. As they sat together, Laura felt a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of their situation. The web of lies she had spun was tightening around her, and she knew that something would have to give. It was a brisk spring evening in Brookfield, the kind where the air held the promise of warmer days to come. The sun had set, casting long shadows over the picturesque streets. In the Roberts home, the usual tranquility was replaced by an eerie silence. The children were at a sleepover, and Laura had told Michael she would be late due to another PTA meeting. Michael, however, had returned home earlier than usual. The suspicions that had been gnawing at him for weeks had finally become too much to ignore. As he turned his key in the lock, a mix of dread and urgency filled his heart. He needed answers. Inside, the house was unusually quiet. Michael set down his briefcase and walked through the dimly lit hallway, his ears straining for any sound. As he approached the living room, he heard faint, muffled voices. His heart pounded in his chest as he pushed the door open. There, through the slightly ajar door, he saw them, Laura and Brian, lost in an embrace that shattered any remnants of doubt in Michael's mind. They were too engrossed in each other to notice his presence. Michael's world, as he knew it, crumbled in that instant. Laura. Michael's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. Laura and Brian sprang apart, their expressions a mix of fear and guilt. Brian stumbled over his words, trying to muster an apology, while Laura stood frozen, her face pale and eyes wide with shock. Michael, Laura's voice broke as she tried to speak, the words catching in her throat. How long? Michael's voice was calm, but it bore an edge that cut through the silence sharply. He didn't look away from Laura, his gaze demanding the truth. The confession spilled out amidst tears and trembling words. Laura told him everything, the initial flirtation, the secret meetings, the lies that had spiraled out of control. Each word felt like a betrayal, reopening the wounds of trust that had bound them together. Brian, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to step in. Michael, I'm sorry. This was never supposed to happen. Get out, Michael said, his voice cold and unyielding. Now. Brian hesitated, looking to Laura for support, but she could only nod. Please, Brian, just go. As Brian left, the weight of the moment settled between Michael and Laura. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts and regret. Michael's next steps were unclear, but one thing was certain. The path forward would be fraught with challenges and decisions about forgiveness, trust, and the potential rebuilding of their broken family. The night grew deeper, and the house returned to its deceptive silence, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had just unfolded. Michael and Laura sat in the living room, the space between them feeling like an insurmountable chasm. Why, Laura? Michael finally asked, his voice a mix of pain and confusion. Why did you do it? Laura wiped away her tears, her hands trembling. I don't know, Michael. I was lonely. You were always working, and I felt like I was losing myself. Brian was there, and it just happened. Michael shook his head, struggling to process her words. I thought we were happy. I thought we had a good life. We do, Laura insisted, her voice desperate. I love you, Michael. I love our family. I never meant for this to happen. But it did, Michael said, his voice hardening. You betrayed me, Laura. You betrayed us. I know, Laura whispered, her heart breaking. And I'm so sorry. I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make it right. I want to fix this. Michael looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and anger. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. As the reality of her actions settled in, Laura felt a crushing weight of guilt and regret. She had torn apart the life they had built together, and the path to redemption seemed impossibly long. In the days that followed, the once serene atmosphere of the Roberts home became charged with tension and sorrow. The revelations of that fateful night echoed through the empty rooms, leaving a palpable chill in the air. Laura, overwhelmed by guilt and remorse, moved through her days in a haze, her interactions with Michael strained and minimal. Michael, for his part, was enveloped in a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, betrayal, and disappointment warred with the memories of the love and happiness they once shared. Despite his pain, he sought counsel from a close friend and legal advisor, considering his next steps carefully. After many sleepless nights, he made the difficult decision to file for divorce, believing it impossible to mend the trust that had been so thoroughly shattered. As the legal proceedings began, the impact of Laura's affair reverberated beyond the confines of their home. Word of the scandal spread through Brookfield, shifting the public's perception of the once admired family. Laura found herself the subject of whispered conversations and pitying looks, her social standing eroding with each passing day. The community she had once been an integral part of now seemed distant and cold. The children, too young to fully understand the reasons behind their parents' separation, felt the shift in their world acutely. Their confusion and sadness added another layer of heartache to the situation. Michael and Laura, in their few interactions, made concerted efforts to shield them from the fallout, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy for their sake. Laura, dealing with the consequences of her actions, sought solace in therapy. She grappled with her feelings of self-betrayal and the destruction she had brought upon her family. The sessions were a painful exploration of her motivations and fears, but they provided a necessary space for reflection and growth. She began to understand the depth of her actions and slowly started to forgive herself, even as she accepted the loss of her marriage. Meanwhile, Michael focused on rebuilding his life and providing stability for his children. He threw himself into his work and took on the role of both parents as best he could. The divorce, while painful, brought him a sense of closure and the freedom to move forward. He reconnected with old friends and rediscovered hobbies he had neglected, finding strength in the support of those who stood by him during his darkest times. As the seasons changed, so too did the lives of the Roberts family. They each found new routines and ways to cope with the changes. The gossip that once buzzed through the town gradually faded as other stories took its place. Life in Brookfield continued, the scars of the past slowly healing over time. The story concludes with a poignant scene at the local park, where Michael and Laura, now divorced, come together for their children's school play. They exchange a brief, genuine smile, a recognition of the pain they've endured and the enduring bond of their family, transformed but enduring. This moment, bittersweet yet hopeful, underscores the theme of the novel, that even in the aftermath of profound betrayal, there is room for growth, forgiveness, and a new beginning. As the curtain falls on the children's performance, the Roberts and the residents of Brookfield are left with a lesson on the fragility of trust and the redemptive power of forgiveness, a poignant reminder that life, with all its imperfections, continues. As our story draws to a close, we witness the Roberts family navigating through the aftermath of betrayal. Despite the heartbreak and the dissolution of their marriage, Michael and Laura find a way to co-parent with grace and understanding. In Brookfield, life continues, marked by lessons learned and hearts slowly healing. Betrayal in Brookfield, the unraveling of a perfect life with a cheating wife, reminds us that even in the face of profound betrayal, there is hope for redemption and growth. The scars left by broken trust can heal over time, leaving behind a testament to resilience and the enduring power of family. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that delve into the complexities of human relationships.